So this is like a synthesis of this longer presentation. And anyone who wants to, that's the link at the bottom for the full presentation. So this is really interesting. Last Wednesday, I went into the health food store and natural food store, and there was a new girl there at the desk. And I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "Atta." And I kind of thought, oh, that's an interesting name. And then I realized, oh, that's the first word of the Yoga Sutras. And that means now. And on the basis of that, all night I was reflecting on that word. And that's this whole slide is an extension of that. So the first verse of the Yoga Sutras now is the teaching on yoga. Atta yoga nushasana. And now, and what does that really mean? And they're like, what I learned, from Maharshi and all that, is the first word of a Vedic literature captures the whole teaching. So I realized, oh, the first word now, I realize, is the core teaching of yoga, the word now. And how could that be? Be in the now. Don't get caught up in random thoughts that drag you into an illusion of the past or the future. Be in the present, be in the now. Now is the only reality that exists. So this, for me, is the whole teaching of the Yoga Sutras, and all comes out of that one word. The word now is the core teaching of the Yoga Sutras. Be in the now. How to do this? So that's the second verse. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the complete settling of the activity of the mind, or some people translate it, yoga is the control of the vrittis, the fluctuations of the mind. So we need to bring the mind under control. We need to settle it down, get rid of somehow all those random thoughts that are taking us into the past and the future and all that. And they're just a few words. So I'm just going to reflect on the word nirodha, because some people translate it as control. Maharshi doesn't like the word control because control indicates effort. And he says it is not effort, but in the sense we don't want to be out of control. And I was thinking, what about a tranquilizer? That calms the mind, but we don't know, that wouldn't be yoga. So just how to reflect on that. We know ahimsa, the concept of non-harm, tells us we don't want to like concentrate or strain the mind or take tranquilizers. And a later verse, or this is from the Bhagavad Gita, balance of mind is called yoga. So whatever we do, we need it to be balanced. That was just a reflection. But anyhow, so now we're going to look at the third verse. So now we know we need to settle the mind. And the question is, what happens if we settle all these fluctuations of the mind? Once we do that, then the observer is established in self-fulfilled consciousness. So once we settle the mind, then we're in that state of yoga, of self-fulfilled consciousness. And then what happens in that state? What's the result of being in that state of self-fulfilled consciousness? That everything, I'll read it. Reverberations of the self emerge from here, the self-fulfilled state, and remain here within the self-fulfilled state. So once we get into that state of the now, we're establishing ourselves, then we're in the state of unity where everything emerges from ourselves, everything comes back into ourselves. So this is unity consciousness. Everything is just a fluctuation of ourself. So that was the whole teaching of yoga, and it all came out of reflecting on that word atta, realizing that, okay, now let's review the procedure from the first segment of the presentation that you didn't see. And I have this all in like one slide. That's this next slide. So, and it realized that yoga nidra is something that came out, and particularly yoga nidra for healing, enlightenment, and world peace was the summary that I came up with. And nidra is like night, so yoga nidra is yoga for the night. And I do this before going to bed every night, and it's been the most practical thing that's come out. Or when I go to sleep at night, or if I wake up in the middle of the night, it's just been a wonderful practice for me. And this is the most practical thing that came out of this course for me, and it's derived from the 8 limbs of yoga, the Yoga Sutras, and the whole thing. I could summarize as surrendering to the divine now in stages. Navartatvam means retire or surrender. And so there's stages. I'm going to go a little slower through the first part and then faster through the second part. So stage one is the 5 yamas. And once we studied that, that's when this whole thing like came to me from what we studied in class. So our part is ahimsa, which I understand is unconditional love, satisfies or is the real purpose of ahimsa. Then we don't harm anything, non-harm, if we're in a state of unconditional love. And that love could be, and most practically, Dorothy Rowe, the healer I did this work, is sort of like for the source of creation. Send that love to God, be in the lap of God. So I lie down, put my hands on my heart, and start filling in the lap of God. And I might just fall asleep, and then that's perfect, or maybe I'll get to the next stage. So the first stage is go beyond where you are, letting go, surrender to divine love. And you can optionally feel a ball of love and light around your heart. So in the second stage, satya, which is truth, but what is the state of truth is the now. It's like not in the future, not in the past, it's in the now. So within that love, feel the body, and that brings us into the now. So we just feel the sat, the eternal truth, the now, and if healing may occur, we may feel some tingling or something, that's great. And so we're just surrendering to sat, the eternal now, and we can let that ball of love, if we want, expand to the whole body while we're feeling that eternal love, and we're just in the now. Then the third step, asteya, which is non-stealing, and this is something that came from Maharishi, sort of interpreted that in terms of unity consciousness. When we're everything, then we're not stealing because there's nothing outside of ourselves. So the state of unity consciousness is asteya, non-stealing. So within that love, expand our awareness to the entire universe rather than just be our body. So we're like surrendering the separation between us and everything else. We're embracing the whole universe. And we can have the vision of that ball of love expanding to the entire universe. So that's our part. So that's only thing we have to do. Then everything else happens automatically. There's some underlying mechanics. And for the full details of that, then you could go through, the full presentation with the link. But now I'm going to go through quickly through more of it. So everything else is automatic. So the fourth of the yamas is brahmacharya. They think of it in terms of celibacy, but if you translate it, charya is like seated or established, and Brahma is like wholeness, so established in wholeness or fullness of fullness. So I just found this, it was like a miracle. I did these 3 stages, and all of a sudden I felt there's a wholeness that just kind of like settled in on my awareness. And that's just this, I realized that's brahmacharya. Then surrendering the parts to the whole, it was automatic. Then aparigraha, the 5th of the yamas, is like non-possession, non-possessing. And then I realized this just automatically happened. That's the state of witnessing when you're not possessing anything, the state of silence. And that's actually like the state of yama, a fullness of emptiness. Yeah, I found I was like in stage 4, I was sitting in that fullness of, that wholeness, that seated in wholeness. Then I realized there's a silence that's witnessing the whole thing. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's a parigraha. So I went through the first 4 steps, and automatically I got to the last step that was just like sitting in silence. And I realized I'd fulfilled the 5 yamas. So these 5 steps are 5 stages to develop, yama consciousness, like silent, that state of silence. So and each of those is a state of surrender. That's why I'm surrendering at the top as a subtitle, surrendering to the divine. So there's actually like 10 steps of surrendering. We've gone through the first 5. So this last one is surrendering dynamism to the silence. We're in the silence. And then So that was all stage one of the 5 yamas. In stage two, there's like 6 stages. And I'm just going through quickly. I'm not, is where you need to see the full presentation, because this is something that Maharshi described, like the self-referral, pulsating of self-referral consciousness. And it's like what's going in, like nowhere, like consciousness is reverberating with itself. We may feel there's like a hum at that point. Like a high frequency hum, but there's something going on in the background, which is like knower, process of knowing and known, Rishi David and Chandas, reverberating within our consciousness. So we're surrendering this stage, the surrender of that silence, the sound, which is that, that vibration of consciousness, that that, high kind of frequency. Then within that, you may find there's some warmth. So this diagram on the right is like Agni, fire. It's like and it's also the first word of the Rig Veda. So there'll be some heat you may feel ignited, some warmth. And I realize that's actually the air element. It's like touch on the skin. So we're surrendering to that vibrating Akash, and it results in warmth, which is Vayu, which is like the air element. So we started with the space element, Akash, and then we got the air element, and then we're going to get the next the elements. And then this is a diagram of, it's called Prachetna, but it's like the eightfold, it's actually the Rig Veda, the 10 mandalas or chapters, or mandalas is like circles, like 10 cones of Rig Veda. It's like the laws of nature enlivened at this point. And Devi Veena is it's also, the musical instrument of Mother Divine that gives rise to the whole creation. It's like the divine sitar of Saraswati. So this is, now we're having vision. So there's form, touch, sight. The fire element is fully enlivened. So we've got, and that's stage 4. So 2 more stages left. Stage 5 is like material creation results. On the right, the dhatus are like the tissues of the body on the right. On the left are the tissues of the universe, like the matter, the planets, the stars, all that stuff. And on the right is the body. And then, so that's physical manifestation. And at that point, we're surrendering to sight and smell. So the last 2, like earth and water elements, are now manifested. So that's, everything is manifested. So and this is all something so there's like material manifestation, and that allows us to fulfill our desires. Stage 6 is synthesis and growth. It's sort of like we do this over and over, and that's why I put at the top Yoga Nidra for healing, enlightenment, and world peace. The more you do it, the more you get out of it, and you have deeper and deeper experiences. It's sort of like for me, like this Yoga Nidra is like a complement to meditation and everything else. And we're surrendering the parts of the whole. Oneness in motion, everything is occurring within ourselves. So this is my reflection on this. There's like the first 5 steps, 1, 2, with those hours on the left, is surrendering activity to silence, to Yama, whose domain is the field of emptiness, sleep. The next 4 steps are surrendering activity within the silence, culminating in a step of synthesis. So then we've done all of them. This procedure is based on the 5 yamas, constitutes a yoga nidra, a practice for the night or sleep. And all steps are in the lap of God, which is like the first step, surrendering to the divine within. And then I had to put this in. Don't take this too seriously, because most of the time you start it and you just fall asleep, and that's perfect. But sometimes and most of them you won't even know. I mean, especially you won't recognize, because you haven't, unless you go through this full hour-and-a-half presentation on, all those charts and what they all mean. So falling asleep or peace at any stage is, or losing time is success. If you do this and you think 10 minutes are up, and then you realize 2 hours have gone by, it's showing you've gone into a state of transcendence. So it's been successful. So that's the most complicated thing in this presentation. Now I go into two things that are really practical. So now you can start breathing again if that was over the top. So just the five niyamas, how they fit. So we just did the five yamas. I figured this one is the five niyamas in that context. While yama governs emptiness, the field of silence and sleep. Out of yama comes niyama, which governs the field of activity or behavior. Niyama arose like from brahmacharya, which is like seated in silence, will commonly translated as celibacy. Brahmacharya can be more generally understood as maintaining one's energy flowing up in activity or being seated in Brahm, wholeness. And then, so now we're going to go through these five niyamas now that, so first step is shauch, be clean, pure, orderly. This is like these are like the five stages or the five steps for activity. Like the yamas were like five steps for like, structuring transcendence and sleep. The five niyamas were how to run rules for running your life, structuring ideal behavior. This is how I understand it. So just be pure, clean, orderly, reducing clutter and waste. This is like creating an orderly physical environment, which is our foundation. And then santosh, then be contented, which santosh translates as fully gratified. Like sam is fully and tosha is gratified. So we're not chasing after sensory, ego, financial, or power gratification. So we let go of all these things. So now we're ready to evolve, to go beyond, to let go and go beyond. So tapas is that process of letting go. It translates sometimes as most commonly as austerity. So letting go of attachments, clutter, unhealthy habits, sugar, programming, self-limitations, localized identifications of who we are. Because if we're attached to, all our things that we do and all our habits, we're not ready to let go. So we have to let go of who we think we are, all the programming that our parents and family and society has put on us. And then so once we've done that, we can move on to swadhyaya, which translates as study as the self, or sometimes it's thought of as study of the scriptures translated, but it means study of the self, going within, meditating, letting go of one layer at a time until ultimately all localized identifications of ego have disappeared and one's ready to fully serve the divine. And that's Ishvara Pranidhana, the last of the niyamas, serving the divine life, live life in devotion to God, the good of all, be an instrument of the divine. So that's the picture of the five niyamas that came out of here. It's like, ideal behavior resulting in serving the divine, letting go of all our little, traumas and identifications and ego and all that stuff, self-gratification. Okay, so now the next slide is the last one on yoga. So let's look at the role of the 6 other limbs of yoga, 6 remaining limbs. And the point here is that all spheres of life need to be worked on simultaneously. So not only behavior, not only niyama and yama, but we also have to work on the other things, our body, our environment and stuff. So asana, which translates as seat, and he says like seating is 2, and the 2 is like silence and dynamism, yama and niyama. So it's like maintaining the stability, which is amidst of the health of the body, environment amidst change. So silence and dynamism is like stability amidst change. So we need to maintain the stability of our body and the environment because we want to be immortal, we want to be healthy. So asana is like maintaining stability amidst change. Ayurveda, Ayurveda is for immortality. Pranayama, regulation of pranayama. On the higher level, Maharshi explained it's the pulsating between activity and and silence to maintain the flow of energy, providing sustenance for the body and creation. So for us, it's our breath, but more generally, it's that maintaining of the flow of energy to maintain all levels of creation. Pratyahara, turning the senses inward. So in order for this pulsation to continue, it needs like pranayama to continue, there needs to be an energy source supplying it. So pratyahara is going in to connect to the energy source and maintain the flow of energy. And then the next three, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, together constitute the process of sanyama. And so I'll just read the last paragraph. Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi combined together as sanyama, the process of diving within to connect to the source of energy in order to maintain the flow of prana. And it's also the mechanics that we need for fulfilling specific needs or intentions, which you might know by the TM City. And the last one, so sanyama can be translated as control, integration, or the completion, the son of yama. Here it fulfills all these roles as the controlled integration of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi to fulfill yama and all 8 limbs of yoga by connecting to the source of energy to maintain the pulsating of prana. So thanks for staying here. Now I'll get to another really fun slide. I think Brahma Sutras and Brahman consciousness. So here's the thing that, like, this just came a day or two ago. So since we just looked at how the Yoga Sutras expand out of the first word of the Yoga Sutra, which is Atta, can we guess what the first word of the Brahma Sutras, what word can all of the Brahma Sutras, encapsulates all of the Brahma Sutras? So the hint are that the Brahma Sutras are developed Brahman consciousness, which is fully developed unity consciousness. So the first word of the Brahma Sutras is atato, meaning now from here. So how do we get all of the whole Brahma Sutras out of the phrase now from here? So this is really neat. So here's the first verse of the Brahma Sutras, atato Brahma jignasa. Now from here, the desire to know Brahman. I mean, it's so simple, but it's how to understand this. So I'm just going to review the Yoga Sutras, and we'll see how the same sort of thing comes out of the Brahma Sutras. So from the Yoga Sutras, the first line was now, which is atta, is the core teaching on yoga, was the line, and we translate it as that the purpose of yoga is to develop the state of now, the present, to be in the present, not the future, not in the past, be in the state of now, the present. So the first of the Brahma Sutras is now from here, atato, emerges the desire to know Brahman. So how do we translate that? The translation is, and this is neat, from unity consciousness, the state of now, here, which is the goal of the Yoga Sutras, emerges Brahman consciousness, the state of now, everywhere. The goal of Brahma Sutras. I have to unpack that a little bit. Like, why is Brahma Sutras the state of now everywhere, whereas Yoga Sutras were the state of now here? So Brahman consciousness develops in stages. It's sort of like I'm looking at Alana if I'm in unity consciousness, and I see Alana in terms of myself, but Cassie's in my second focus of attention, so I don't see her in terms of myself. Then then it develops that I can have both Alana and Cassie in terms of myself. And then the third focus would be Chrissy, and I see Chrissy in terms of myself. And ultimately, Brahman consciousness develops as like the things closer to us, then farther, then things that we can, that ultimately the whole universe, even things that we can just imagine as terms of ourselves. So it's like everywhere and everything is in terms of ourselves. So that's how we can see Brahman consciousness as a state of now everywhere in terms of the self. Now everywhere is Brahman. And we'll look at that. And we also is Brahman. So from now everywhere is I'll just repeat that. Now everywhere is the seed for Brahman consciousness, because everything comes out of that desire, that initial seed, now everywhere. And now the last part of this is desire. There's a prerequisite. There needs to be a desire to know Brahman. So we both need to be in a state of unity consciousness and have the desire to know Brahman, and then the state of know now everywhere can result. We'll develop unity consciousness, which is the goal of the Brahma Sutras. So how to develop Brahman consciousness. So this is the fourth of the Yoga Sutras, Tat to Samanvayat, and it says that is through unifying nature. It sort of means that is gained through unifying nature, but Maharishi also translates that word Samanvayat as the churning, like unifying churning between infinite silence and infinite dynamism. The next slide goes into this is like the seed for the next slide. So it's sort of like the churning or the synthesis between infinite silence and infinite dynamism is our awareness. And that's what, like all the different stages of unity consciousness, and that together, like all these different stages, results in Brahman consciousness. But this, I've got 2 more slides on Brahman consciousness. And so we're through most of the presentation by now. But in developing Brahman consciousness, this is another talk by Maharishi called Yoga Talk from August 12, 1974. So this is a few points. In transcendental consciousness, the senses and normal serve as intellect are transcended. So the point is in transcendental consciousness, we normally think of there's no intellect. We're just like floating in the transcendent. We're in a state of, transcendental consciousness. But once we practice TM or meditation, whatever form, we experience transcendental consciousness and develop into unity, there's a more refined, sharper value of intellect that develops that can discern the parts within unity. So it's like all these different structures, knower, process, known, Vedic literature, and all the pictures in that previous diagram of like the music and Mother Divine and all that. We start to see all of that, all those parts within unity. Then finally, all those things. So from there, cognition begins. The unity is broken into parts, and then all those parts are synthesized together into Brahman consciousness. So that's what that process is, in putting the parts together, like all the different aspects into Brahman consciousness. We start with now, from the state of unity consciousness where we get more and more parts, and then we go into now everywhere, where all those parts are, in terms of myself, they're all integrated together. So this is, I kind of decided I'd just be fun. So is there anything after Brahman consciousness? Well, I know, several people who seem to be experiencing Brahman consciousness, and they say the final stage of it is para Brahman. I thought, what the heck, I'll put that in here. And there are a few characteristics of para Brahman, and I'll just say that quickly. One is, initially in Brahman consciousness, it's actually funny to say this, it's kind of like flat, like without much, emotion. You lose emotions. Everything is like the same and stuff like that. And then you can have the desire, and then you can start having emotions and love and enjoying life and stuff. And another characteristic of para Brahman is you can start having healing abilities to be able to channel universal energy. They call it transmission. And then if that's your dharma, you can help others, achieve that. But anyhow, so now the first 4 verses of the Brahma Sutras. I told you the first and the fourth, but now let's go through the first 4 and see how they unfold. So the first verse we already looked at. Now from here, the desire to know Brahman. So this is like a summary of that. So the starting point of the Brahma Sutras is unity consciousness, that state of now from here, and having the desire to know Brahman. So these are like the stages for developing Brahman consciousness. So we start in unity consciousness with the desire to know Brahman. Now, the next thing is, what is the vision of the goal? Where do we want to go? And that's to me the second and third verse. So I'll just read the right. So we think that Brahman is the source of creation, of maintenance, evolution, the three gunas. So this is what we want to realize. We want to realize Brahman, the source of the entire creation, maintenance, and evolution, the three gunas. And also it's the source of all of scripture. The word Shastra on the left means scripture, source of the scripture, which is source of the Rig Veda, its enfoldment in the entire Vedic liturgy. So now we know our starting point, unity, consciousness, desire, no Brahman. We know where we want to go. So we have a picture, we put down on our refrigerator. All right, this is where we want to get to. We want to get to the state of Brahman. Now we know what the state of Brahman is. Now it's how do we get there? What's our game plan for getting to the state of Brahman? Consciousness, or the state of Brahman, what's our game plan? And that's the fourth verse. Tatu Saban Bayat, by churning in self-referral consciousness means by doing our meditation practice or whatever, between infinite silence and infinite dynamism, that's how we get to the state of Brahman. So now we've got to the three parts. We know where we're starting from. We got a vision of the goal, and we've got a plan for getting there. So now we jump into it and start doing our practice. So this is pretty much the end of the presentation. I have two summary charts. So this is just in case you want to see the full, an hour and a half video with me and Dorothy Rowe. This is like how it starts. In 1974, Maharishi said that underlying and maintaining the entire creation is a continual pulsating between fullness of fullness and fullness of emptiness. And Maharishi said the 8 limbs of yoga maintain this continual pulsating that underlies creation. This is the highest value of the 8 limbs of yoga. So then the question is, where can we locate this pulsation between fullness and fullness of emptiness that underlies creation, and the role of the 8 limbs of yoga maintaining this? So that's the whole purpose of that entire an hour and a half presentation, and that chart, which had these 10 different steps of surrender and stuff, that all came out of this. And if we want to see the full presentation, this is the link to it. If I post this, entire presentation, I'll put the link under it. So here's Maharishi. All gratitude to Maharishi for sharing with us the complete knowledge of the Vedic tradition. And I did put this last slide on just because, it's a great Vedic quote, Asuto ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotir gamaya meteor ma amritam gamaya. From non-existence lead us to existence, from darkness lead us to light, from death lead us to immortality. So we want to go to the state of Brahman consciousness and immortality. Okay, so that's the entire presentation. And the translations of the Sanskrit were from Tom Egg, this